Welcome to another episode of Walchet Talks. Everyone is talking about design thinking and what a great process it is for ideating and creating a great customer experience for any pain point. Recently, it has become very popular with lawyers in improving processes and increasing efficiency around legal service delivery. So today we want to dig a little bit deeper and understand what constitutes design thinking and how it can be applied to the practice of law. We have Josh Kubicki, co-founder and design lead at Bold Duck Studios, to help us break it down. Welcome, Josh.
Hello, thank you for having me.
We're really excited to have you. To give you a little bit more background, let's get into what Josh had done before he was at Bold Duck Studios. Josh is a qualified lawyer, and he co-founded Bold Duck Studios, which is a consultancy firm that provides lean and design consulting to future-proof legal service delivery. Prior to these, he has worn several different professional hats. To mention a few, he was an adjunct professor at the Michigan State University, where he taught design thinking in legal services, and was also a chief strategy officer at Seyfarth Shaw LLP. He also founded LTI Consulting, a firm that focused on launching and growing new businesses in legal markets from idea or concept to profitability. In a nutshell, he has a ton of experience in design thinking for legal service delivery, and that's perfect for our conversation today. So I'm going to jump right into the questions. Design thinking, as we were talking about, is one of the latest buzzwords in innovation. It is not new and has been around for a while. But for our audience, I was wondering if you could please break down exactly what design thinking means.
Yes, you're right. It has enjoyed a lot of popularity in recent years and certainly has made its way into legal. So the best way I describe design thinking, and I mean all respect, this can sometimes come across as me being a little bit condescending to design thinking, and that's not my intention. But if you just think about design thinking, it really is nothing more than thinking like a designer. It's similar to analytical thinking or thinking like a lawyer. There's lawyer thinking. Lawyers think a certain way. We break down problem sets and fact sets and client circumstance in certain ways. We use comparative thinking. We use precedent-based problem solving. Design thinking is nothing more than applying the skills and mindsets and tools of design to a certain problem or challenge you're trying to face. The one thing I want to add there is design thinking isn't design. It's thinking like a designer. And we can kind of go further, but that's my definition. And maybe that's not as handy as you would like, but that's why we're doing this podcast. We'll break it down further, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I'm going to dig a little bit deeper because my next question is going to be, why does a lawyer need to think like a designer? So maybe you could give us a few examples or use cases of how design thinking has been applied to legal services.
Yeah, so let me extrapolate on the previous question, and I'll answer that question. So what design is design is a discipline and approach that looks at circumstances from a human-centered point of view. So contrast it with Lean Six Sigma. That tends to, the dominant feature of Lean is looking at problems or challenges through a process-centered lens. If we look at sort of scientific management, which is a leadership style in the way sort of Western companies are driven, that looks at things from a hierarchical and reporting-centered approach, right? So an organizational approach. So design is nothing more than a work process that we use to break down problems and challenges in a manner that we can then solve for, and design is human-centered. So that's the distinctive quality of design. And there's lots of flavors of design: graphic design, product design, communication design, what I am, a business designer. So to answer your most recent question, why does this matter in legal right now? And why is design having a moment? Well, it's because the legal profession, I believe, and I argue and through my experience, struggles to maintain its humanity. And what I mean by that is being a lawyer.
I think that might be a controversial point.
It might be, but nonetheless, a very real point. Real, maybe not for everybody. But the legal profession drive certain behaviors, drive certain cultural phenomenons within law firms and within law practices and legal teams, whether you're in government or in-house. And it's not unknown, at least here in the US, that the lawyer profession is not known for being the healthiest profession, both physically, mentally, and emotionally. We also know that clients, whether they're business clients or people clients, individuals, we know that legal services is not consistently rated as one of the most delightful, wonderful experiences a consumer can have.
Everyone hates going to a lawyer.
Yeah, yes. Well, this is good then, because I think we need to be mindful in the modern era that we find ourselves. In any Western culture, whether it's India, whether it's the US, whether it's the UK, whether it's Australia, any sort of culture that has a mature legal system, has a strong rule of law, there's going to be lawyers and there's going to be services. And to be mindful and intentional about designing our services, how we interact with our clients, how we interact with one another in a way that is more human than it is non-human. And for example, like what would non-human? It's treating your client as an object, a means to an end, right? It's forgetting that they have an emotional challenge as well as a functional challenge that you, the lawyer, are trying to address. We tend to forget that in some instances. How we treat each other, how partners, if you're in a law firm, treat associates, treat the infamous non-lawyer, and the cultural challenges that we have as our profession, the legal profession, treats those who are not part of the legal profession. There's a lot of humanity in our profession. It's a very human. Lawyers are humans. Our brain, how we interact is the product in many ways. And so we need to be mindful of the social and emotional experience of those we interact with. And I think that's why design is coming in, and to kind of lead you where I think we're going to go here. As technology advances into legal, we can't forget that technology doesn't just solve a functional problem. Technology brings with it an emotional challenge, an emotional experience as well. And if we're not designing legal technology to consider the emotional response of the user, of the consumer, the customer, the client, so on and so forth, we're going to fail at adoption and creating legal technology that actually works, number one goal, and is used, the second goal. But I'll stop talking there.
No, I actually completely agree with everything that you said. And I think that's also why lawyers, whether they're in-house or in law firms, take longer to adopt. They have more challenges with change management because I think the profession also gears you in a different way. You're more risk averse. You're always used to, approaching things where you know all of the risks. So you don't want to be vulnerable. You don't want to be trying something new and failing and not figuring it out. So there's so much aversion to not knowing it all that you kind of just train yourself to think a certain way and not look out of the box or not feel vulnerable. So I think it's important to retrain all of our minds so that we're open to different ways of thinking.
And it's a challenge, right? I mean, let's put the constraints of our profession into that conversation. And that is, one, lawyers are generally more busy than they are less busy. So that means we don't have a lot of time to reach beyond our immediate expertise and knowledge, right? We just don't have the luxury of time for continuous learning.
Correct.
Our work tends to be strenuous. It's emotionally strenuous. It's cognitively straining. So how much energy do we then have after we've done all our lawyer work to then advance our own thought and sort of have a mental playground, if you will? Not too many lawyers can claim to have that luxury. And so that is a constraint of our profession too. So I always raise those because I think it's easy to say lawyers are this or that. I'm not suggesting you were. But I think people forget the realities that most lawyers are working in a scarcity environment, scarcity of time, scarcity of clients, scarcity of mental health. And that starts to back up on us.
an increasing amount of competition from competing firms in different countries, or even again from the clients who are now, asking for more fixed fee mandates than billable hour mandates. So it's a lot of pressure that lawyers are under.
Indeed.
I'm going to change gears a little bit, Josh. And in one of the webinars that I had attended of yours, you provided an example of a Brazilian telecom company that reduced a customer contract from 33 pages to 2 pages. I was wondering if you could go through that example a bit for our audience.
Yeah, let me just pull that up here real quick.
Sure.
So this is not my work. This is work by Villa Design Studio, a visual law studio in Brazil. And how I got to know them is that they got recognized by CLOC, which is legal operations, a huge legal operations member-driven community. It's global, for the Legal Innovation and Operations project, the LEO project, which my design studio conceptualized and runs on behalf of CLOC. So what you're seeing on the left-hand side is what their customer, now this is Tim. Tim is a mobile service provider. So your mobile phone service, here in the US, it's Verizon, AT&T. I'm not sure what it is in other countries, but in Brazil, Tim is one of those. Villa is the name of the design agency. And the challenge was the customer contract, paper contract that customers were asked to review and sign was four separate documents and 33 pages. Now, we know how many customers actually read this thing. Probably none, right? None, right? And if they did, they probably got confused. Right, exactly. Just like all of us, when we download a new app or something on our phone, we just, the terms and conditions, yep, approve, go on, move on with our life. Well, there's actually important stuff in the contract, right, that the company wants you to know about and that you should be aware of. So,
but the truth is, it's so tedious to go through that no user really wants to spend the time reading 33 pages.
Exactly. So what Villa did is it transferred those 4 documents and 33 pages on the left to the right-hand side, which is 1 document, 2 pages. And okay, so a reduction in volume of information, big goal, but also look at the visual layout. Look at the visual layout compared to the documents on the left and on the right? Like, and I'm going to stop sharing here. And this is sort of the quintessential element of design. So you could say functionally, we had a reduction of information and a reduction of paper. That's great. Functionally, that's a good goal. That's a good benchmark. But you could have easily done that, and the new contract, the 2-page contract, was less effective, right? So it's not just functional. So the next thing that a designer did, and what Villa did, is say, okay, how is the emotional response from the customer to these 2 things? And let me geek out here for a moment. The challenge with design, when you enter the realm of human-centered, you're dealing with an emotional element and a social element of the user, not just functional. The trick is sometimes a consumer could look at a 2-page, 1-page contract, and they could have a reaction that you didn't intend, such as, this doesn't seem like a serious company. Like, I want my mobile provider to look and act like a real mobile provider. I'm used to seeing all these papers that I don't read and so on. So what are they, a startup? Are they trying to hide something on me? Because what information isn't in this contract?
Yeah.
As a designer, you have to take that into account and constantly balance those adverse unknown reactions with the net positive of having a newly designed product or a contract in this case. It's not just, well, let's make it look pretty, which is often what people think of when they think of design. They think of, oh, let's have it have a good aesthetic, a cool looking aesthetic. It's like aesthetic is one element of design, but the emotional experience of the viewer, of the user, is actually the most fundamental element of design.
You also mentioned the social. So
yes.
What does that look like?
So social is really big, especially in legal, because we know in legal, lawyers tend to be branded as followers, not leaders, when it comes to adopting new things. Well, why is that? You already hit on one. We tend to be risk averse. We don't want to be viewed as the first at doing anything, because if we fail, then we're the fools. And so we're hoping someone else leads. So we have this thing, it's called social copying. We're comfortable copying others. We're not comfortable leading others. We want to be associated with success. We don't want to be associated, obviously, with failure. But what precedes failure? Experimentation, novelty, creativity. All of these things lawyers tend to view as on-ramps to potential failure. So we don't want to exhibit those qualities, because that could ultimately lead to failure. So what we do is we emulate, we project to the market certainty. To your point earlier, we stay in our specific domain. We don't explore alternative domains or disciplines or ways of thinking. We wrap ourselves in the hierarchy of our profession, the partner, the associate, the non-lawyer. All those things constrain us because we're socially driven. We're a socially driven profession. I could go on and on, but I want to be mindful of what you want to spend the most time on. Because there's an exercise I have everyone do that maybe if we have time, I'll have you do it with me, because it's a good example of emotional and social and functional.
I think now we've gotten everybody's interest peaked and we have to go into it. But okay. I'll let you decide whether you want to do it now or later.
Let's just do it now, and then okay, sure. I promise not to spend a lot of time. So for any of the listeners, and for you as well, and I'll do it too, you just pull out your mobile phone, okay? You just pull out your mobile, and immediately you have just look at the mobile phone, okay? So look at my cover. My cover is very basic. So you look at the phone, just look at, okay. So you have a black case. I have a black case. Yeah. Have you seen people that have very colorful phones and cases? Okay. That's a social element, right? They're trying to say something to people who look at them with their phone and all that. They're trying to broadcast, like, I'm funky, I'm cool, I have a cause, like maybe there's a cause or a social cause. Yeah. Okay. So that's one social element. Then we look at the screen, the welcome screen, and how many people have different, like, there's my daughter, like you have a very utilitarian one, right? Here's the final exercise. Just scroll through your phone and look at all the apps. And what I ask people to do is just think immediately, look at each app and ask yourself, what's your emotional response to it, right? Is it uncertainty? Is it confusion? Is it stress? Is it delight? Is it intrigue? Is it curiosity? Is it learning? All of your apps have an emotional, at least one emotion beyond the function. So you got a banking app, you got a Twitter, all right? Yeah. The other thing is, to get to social, is the apps that you have are indications of how they're brands generally, right? So the brands we associate with are trying to say something to the world about us, how we want to be perceived. It's similar to the car that we drive, the neighborhood that we live in, the sports team that we back. All of that is a social signal to others for, pay attention to me because I care about these things, or I'm associated with these things. That's the social element.
Interesting. I have to admit, for a minute there, I was a little worried about what you were going to ask me and put me on the spot on, because the lawyer in me came out and said, oh my God, I'm going to be vulnerable and this is like all being recorded.
There you go. Perfect example. Yes. Well done.
So I totally get all of the lawyers out there that are, worried about getting out of their comfort zone. So I think this sort of leads into my next question. Sorry, you were saying?
No, I was going to say, I'm sure some privacy lawyers just had a major meltdown because I'm like sharing my home screen and like, what am I saying about myself? Yeah, I'm sure. Anyway.
Yeah. So how does a team of lawyers start introducing design thinking in their processes? Because often they may not even have people who are trained in design thinking in their team or in their company or in the law firm. So what would you recommend they do to sort of kickstart the process?
So I get this question a lot, and it's an unpopular answer. So for that, I guess I'll apologize, but I shouldn't, because I believe it's the right answer. And that is, don't go public with any design-driven initiatives until you've applied design in a manner that you can control the outcome. You can control the process. You don't want to introduce design without having the goods to show for the impact on it. And I see lots of organizations do this. It's like, let's have a design thinking jam or sprint. And no one's done any of the work to demonstrate why anyone should be investing their time in something called design thinking. And what ultimately happens in 90% plus of those initiatives is everyone gets together, it's fun, you're using sticky notes, you're brainstorming, you're coming up with ideas, it's a good bonding session, that's awesome, great outcome, but it goes nowhere. So that's the biggest mistake, because you're sacrificing an immediate positive outcome of getting everyone in the room together and jamming, that's great. But long-term, you're going to seed doubt in what design can do because no one sees the outcome. So start with the smallest project possible that you believe a human-centered approach is beneficial for. Learn a little bit about the design process. Understand what human-centered is. For instance, I'll give you a great example. There's lots of practice groups that are under pressure to remain profitable at a certain level because of fee pressure on clients. And this is a lot of the work that we do. So you could say, well, Josh, the easy solution is to raise our rates. And that's what a lot of law firms do. And to savvy clients, they're going to say, okay, thank you, but no, we're not going to pay those rates. And so that doesn't solve the problem in a sustainable manner. They could process engineer the practice group and say, okay, well, we're working inefficiently. Our workflow is siloed. We're not using technology appropriately. Every lawyer has their own system, their own process. And so we're working incredibly inefficiently. Okay, great. If you're on a billable hour model, there's zero incentive to do that. But put that aside. What's the incentive just for me, Josh, to adopt someone else's way of working? Why would I want to do that? Just because it's a more efficient process? I don't care. Efficiency doesn't mean effective. And I'm highly effective working the way I've always worked as a lawyer. So damn your process. I don't care. I'm going to do things my way. That's a perfect example of where human-centered comes in. As a designer, in a design mindset, you got to say to yourself, okay, what's the human behavior that's currently working? And how can I operate within that framework to get them to adjust their behavior? So for instance, instead of forcing a process onto a lawyer or a template for document automation or something like that, you have to ask yourself, what is that lawyer's experience going to be like? Do they need to be involved in the process? Do they ever have an opportunity to air their grievances, to air their stress over how they're working in a manner that's not threatening to them? What is that form? Is that a survey? Is that an interview? Is that a group collaboration question? Is that a casual conversation in a hallway that I've got to create for that person to build trust, to build camaraderie, to build familiarity? This is where design starts to feel messy to those that are not used to it, because everyone wants a nice framework. They want a nice canvas or a grid and say, well, what's step one and what's step two? I want to be a designer. Like, it's not that clean. You have to unlock the human experience in each of the humans that are going to be impacted by the new way of doing this. And so start where you can start in an environment that you can control. If you are a lawyer in a practice group that is under price pressure, what can you control? What can you test? What can you demonstrate that other people will pay attention to? And then you can say, you want to know how I did this? And you don't say design thinking, by the way. You don't say, I'm a design thinker. Just explain the process. No one knows you have to be using design thinking. No one cares. No one cares if you're using lean, design thinking. No one cares about what you're using. They only care that you solve the problem that they feel attracted to now. They feel attracted to the solution.
Yeah, very true. So design thinking also, like you mentioned, it's not just the right solution for every problem. It works really well in some situations. So I was wondering if you could help us understand which situations, or rather, how does one identify which is a good situation for or a problem for design thinking?
Yeah, I think see, I'm design driven, so I view everything through the design lens. So it's very challenging for me because I see the human element in everything. But I'll try to use a legal technology example, okay?
Okay.
Because this happens a lot, and I won't get on my soapbox. I promise. I've been on my soapbox a lot with you. So lots of times, and let's stay in the realm of law firms for the time being, but this applies to any organization. Lots of times, law firms will buy the CIO or technology team will buy a new technology. All right.
Yeah.
How do they make that purchase? Whose input did they get? What kind of requirements did they get? Fine, whatever. Let's assume they bought the technology. Okay, now they have it. Now they've got to let the firm, the lawyers, know that they have this technology. Well, how do they typically do that? Well, they typically do that by not telling them, right? They just have it and they reach out to individual lawyers that they know wanted it, so on and so forth. Maybe they put it on the intranet. Maybe they send out an email. But generally what they're doing is they're describing the technology. What they're not doing is describing the unique problem that it solves for the individual lawyer and how to use that technology to address that problem. They say, here's a technology we bought. It does X, Y, Z. We're giving training on these coming days. And so the lawyer's like, okay, if I have time. They go to the training, and the training consists of technical training. Like, you move your mouse here. This is how you log in. This is what this button is for. No one cares about that. The lawyer mind is, this is solving no problem for me in my daily life. This does not impact my
And I don't even have the time to attend this training.
Right. Now I'm wasting my time, and these people that are training me have no idea what practice I'm in. They have no idea what I do every minute that I'm not here taking this ridiculous technology training. Yeah. So what would a design-driven trainer do? A design-driven trainer would take a practice group, just get up to speed a little bit. Maybe have an interview or a session with one of the partners and say, listen, I'm from the technology team. I got to admit, I do not know what you guys do all day. We had this technology, but before I even show it, can you just, like, in layman's terms, just tell me what you guys do, because I want to be training you and I want to be using the language that you guys use. I want to be reflecting the problems and client problems. That's a half an hour. That is zero time investment, right? You've just bought tens of thousands of dollars or more of technology. Taking a half an hour to get on someone's schedule, which I guarantee most lawyers will take that time if you tell them what it's for. They'll be like, yeah, I'm going to make you more successful and me more successful and my partners. Yes. Then you take that information, you go back to your training team. You say, okay, we're going to train this practice group because this technology, this is how they're going to interpret it. And this is the specific, just one. You don't have to solve every problem. Just say, this is one of the problems that they run into with clients or amongst themselves. And we're just going to walk them through how this technology eases that process. And yeah, we're going to say there's other benefits, but let's just get really, and then you do it to another practice group. And then you do it to another practice group. Now, most people listening will be like, oh my God, there you go. You're spending all this time. You're telling me to meet. Well, yeah, that's what being effective is about. There is no easy button when it comes to change management. There is no easy button. You can't send out the world's most well-crafted email and everyone's going to use the technology. It just doesn't work that way. You got to meet them where they are.
Funny. I've seen so many firms that will not renew software the next year because they feel the adoption has been poor, but they will not take the time to invest in spending time with the lawyers and figuring out how to communicate to them that this technology solves this particular pain point of theirs. Because that could be, like you mentioned, much more effective.
Yes. And here's the other a little tip. If your firm has an innovation committee or a technology committee of lawyers, that's not the forum to do your research because there's too much noise. There's competing egos, competing personalities. That's not that's not the best forum to do it. Go one-on-one, go practice group by practice group. It demonstrates more investment of your team and yourself in that specific practice group, which is always a good thing. And it's a less protected environment. You're going to get more candid insight. You're going to get inside scoop and inside baseball on the practice group. And that only makes you better as you start to design the training for that practice group.
And actually, I found when you do this exercise, sometimes you'll get really good inputs from one practice group, which will help you design your next session with the next practice group in a far more effective manner.
Yes, it trains you how to ask smarter questions, right? Your first interview, your first session, you're not going to have the smart questions, right, that apply practice group to practice group. But as you go on, you're going to have smarter questions. And that only ups your brand inside the firm and organization.
Thank you so much, Josh, for your time. It's been an extremely engaging session, and I think we've all learned a lot about how design thinking can be useful and relevant to lawyers' everyday life. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.